Adam Rosenfeld, welcome to the Forward One podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Really appreciate you guys having me today.
Such a dynamic dude. Couldn't be more grateful to have you here. Everyone I ask about Adam, and it's always like, that guy is a rock star, superstar, so nice. The level of business you do, the purposefulness, the intention, it's just everywhere. So again, excited to
really appreciate it. I never get tired of the kind words. It's an interesting business and you get to meet a lot of interesting people. It's all walks of life. And I hope it doesn't sound trite, but I genuinely try to live by the golden rule. And there's a lot of interesting personalities in this business. It's not hard to be kind. It's genuinely not. So every day, strive to do that. And if you do that, you build relationships and good things come.
You attract what you project.
Yep.
And at the same time, I hate to say this, often we see, volume sort of go in the opposite direction of kindness, as you've said.
You do, especially at the top end of the business. And look, there's a lot of amazing people in our business, no question. But, one of the biggest issues with our business, at least from my perspective, is just the barrier of entry. It's so low. And I think with the social mediaization of the industry and of the world, and obviously the TV shows you see on Netflix and Bravo, et cetera, it depicts a really kind of false representation of what the business is. And I think that lures a lot of people in because it's shown to be a very sexy business. And there are aspects of it that are, but there's a lot more that goes into it than kind of what meets the eye, at least on the front telling story of television. And when you get into the back end, oftentimes I think people lose this notion that we're all in this for the same thing. And the best deals that I've ever been a part of have been the ones where agents are working mutually together, obviously taking care of their client and making sure they're building trust and doing their job as a fiduciary, but ultimately working together to get to resolution. When it becomes adversarial, which is the way it's often depicted, what's the point? A lot of agents will inject themselves into a deal, cause a problem, to then solve the problem, to go back to the client and be like, look what I fixed for you. And ultimately, we just end up back where we started. And that's usually when transactions fall apart.
Well said. I mean, it's just so much ego, and as opposed to keeping perspective on what we're trying to accomplish, which is to serve our clients and get deals done when they make sense, right? And it's not about who takes the credit. It's about fulfilling the purpose.
A very large transaction can seem very sexy for sure. But, at the end of the day, you're still into doing the sewer line testing and, figuring out the nitty gritty and, making sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And then when you're dealing with very expensive properties or Hollywood clients, then you're dealing with intermediaries all the time, and their job, essentially, they believe their job is to look out for their job is to look out for their client, but they believe they demonstrate that by, creating some waves. If you have a business manager that's in the middle and it's a flawless deal, the business manager feels like, I'm not demonstrating any value because I didn't find any hidden.
Yeah, we deal with a lot of that. It's been an interesting dichotomy. In my career, I've sold properties from $600,000 to north of $90 million. The transactions are very similar. There's not a lot that's different in the day-to-day other than the personalities that are involved. But you're right. I mean, in terms of the nuance of any one transaction, it's the same inspections, it's the same emotionality. Oftentimes in the larger transactions, the person I'm representing has a much larger net worth than I do. But for the most part, you'd be surprised. Some of those personalities in the higher end of the industry have been incredibly kind to me. And I actually love the deals where the business managers are involved because it removes a lot of the emotionality. And I'm dealing with a fiduciary on their side who has one objective, which is serving the client. And I also love it as a business model. For myself and John, it's been, I think, a way that we've been able to work smarter instead of just doing traditional prospecting and going door to door and dealing with your average mom and pop who's selling a house once every 10 years. We cater specifically these days to business managers because they kind of hold the keys to the city. And if you are able to pick up one great business manager as a client, really be their guy, and make sure that they can rely on you fully, you've just picked up 30 high net worth clients.
Absolutely.
Always about leverage to me. And that's just a great way to create leverage. And not only leverage in terms of the level of business you do, but leveraging your unique skill sets, because you guys are smart, business minded, and that's a way to, again, leverage your strengths. That's the key to everything in life, and it creates sustainability and it creates a lot more enjoyment. And that's what drives sustainability.
And I really enjoy the business.
Yeah,
I got to tell you, I went to Michigan. We talked about this off camera for a second, but we used to have a coach there named Jim Harbaugh. And he would always say, attack every day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. And that's how I feel about waking up and going to work every day in the practice of residential real estate in Beverly Hills in Southern California.
Attack every day
with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Unknown to mankind.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
I like it.
We'll take that quote. We're gonna leave Coach Harbaugh out of it, and we'll just
attribute it to you.
Yeah, we'll call that the Rosenfeld.
Sorry, Coach.
Yeah. Just for background, you're a young guy. So how long have you been in the business? Youngish. Okay.
Youngish guy.
How long have you been in the business? What attracted you to real estate? How much business did you do in your first year? How much business did you do in your best year?
Great questions. So I'm 43 years old. I've been in the business since 2012. So carry the one, I guess we're going on 14-ish, 15-ish years, give or take. It was a strange transition for me. This is not what I ever saw myself doing. It's more or less something I fell into. So my background is very different. I started in law. So after college, went to law school, very briefly practiced and realized pretty quickly that it just wasn't for me. It's not what I wanted to do. I think I knew that early on, but coming out of college without really having a clear path, there was a lot of push from the family to go and get a professional degree. And after that, I actually just did a complete 180, and I thought I was going to go to medical school. So I went back to college. I did a post-bac for 2.5 years. Took the MCAT a couple times, which really kicked my ass. It was very difficult. And I applied to, I think, 25 medical schools. And in the process of doing that, you're given what's called a glide year, which is essentially your application year when you're coming out of a post-bac and you don't have a lot to do. A lot of students will go and they'll do medical research, or they will work in hospitals, et cetera. I ended up in New York City for a period of a year. And after that year, I wasn't sure that I was going to get in. As mentioned, I applied to 25 schools. I was getting rejected left and right. It was so competitive, and had a personal relationship that was falling apart. And my brother had just moved to Los Angeles on a whim. He had done really well for himself in his early 30s, and he got in his SUV and drove across country, and he settled in Santa Monica. So kind of in a quarter-life crisis, I came out here to visit him just to bide my time and see what was going to happen. And what was supposed to be a few weeks, I'm here 15 years later. And, I think I ended up getting into 2 schools, but one was in East Lansing, Michigan, and the other was in Tallahassee, Florida. And I was about 30 years old, and I was so burnt out. And I fell in love with Los Angeles. It's hard not to. I come from Miami, which is a beautiful place. We always joke and say that it's a sunny place for shady people. And I love Miami, and I miss it, and I think about it all the time. But LA has genuinely become home. I think after being here for 10 years, you're considered to be an Angelino. And I remember trying to figure out, okay, if I'm going to stay here, what is it that I'm going to do with my life? And I was sitting on the couch with my brother, and we were watching $1 Million Listing. And my brother is 6 years older than me. He's always kind of been a father figure as well. And I remember him saying, that's what you should do. You're tailor-made for that. And I think he actually said, if these donkeys can do this, you can do this. And it's funny because I think we were watching Josh and Matt, who have become 2 really good friends of mine. Just the serendipitous nature of how everything works out is hysterical. And I thought, I don't know, man. It seems so cheesy to me. Like it just doesn't really align with my personality and who I am. But I looked into it a little bit more. And the only reason that I went into this business is because I had the legal background and the law degree. At the time, I was not required to take any of the coursework to get licensed. So I figured, why not? Just go and get the exam. And my brother had bought his first project as a developer. He decided he was going to shift career paths and start building houses, which he had no experience in. And he bought this property in Tarzana for like $700,000. And he was in the process of renovating it. He had partnered with a GC. And he said to me, look, if you go get licensed, you can represent this property. And he was very against me going to medical school. I think at that time, my family felt like I was just kind of treading water, wasn't really sure which direction to go. And he was very adamant that I should be in the business world. So he dangled this carrot in front of me. And he kind of laid out for me what that would look like from an earnings perspective, which, if he was able to get 1.5 on the back end, that was going to be a commission of roughly $30,000 to me, maybe a little bit more. And I had never seen money like that before. So I was like, bet, let's do it. And I went and I got licensed. And, maybe a little bit arrogantly, I thought, I'm a lawyer. Like, how hard is this going to be? I'm going to come into Beverly Hills, all high and mighty, and I was going to pick up business left and right. And that was a rude awakening for me. It did not happen like that. I was humbled very quickly. So I started working as an assistant. And I remember I emailed, must have been over 100 agents. I think at the time it was Hilton Highland and the agency were the two companies that I was kind of targeting. I think 2 people responded. And one was generous enough to give me an opportunity. And it took me 2 years to do my first transaction. The house my brother was working on ended up taking 3 years to complete. And that was just far out of my purview at the time. And it was a grind. And I realized relatively quickly that, the basic model of prospecting was going to take a lot of time. And I think it works great for a lot of agents that really have the fortitude to go and do it every day. For me, I wanted to take a different approach. And my ultimate objective was always to get into the development side of the business. That's what I wanted to do. So I figured brokerage was going to be a transition into development. And I saw what my brother was doing, and it looked really interesting. And anyone I'd ever known, back in South Florida, pre the tech and AI days that ever made like real generational wealth had done it in real estate investing and development. So I started to learn the business from the scope of a developer. And I started to learn how they underwrite these deals. And I started to try to learn, okay, what is land value? What is it going to cost to build? What is the process of working with expediters and architects and contractors? And what actually goes into this? And how do you determine what margin needs to be made? And how do you make that margin? And I started by just walking onto construction sites, and I would walk up on the trailers and I'd knock on the door and I'd have my little pitch, which was something along the lines of, you probably have somebody that's representing this property. I'm assuming somebody brought you this deal and you have a relationship. I'm not trying to step on those toes. I'm not here trying to get a listing. But if you're doing this one, I'm guessing you want to do others. And I just want the opportunity to hustle some stuff off market for you. And if I can bring you an opportunity, all I ask is you allow me to represent you and give me a piece of the back end. And when I started doing that, things started to snowball. And like I talked about the general mom and pop before that are doing one deal every 10 years, developers are doing 3 to 5, sometimes more transactions in a year. It just seemed like a better business model for me. And once I learned that aspect of the business, it was rough at first because everything that would come across my desk off market, I would send it. And these guys would get pissed at me. They're like, why are you wasting my time with these BS deals? There's no money in these. So I had to really kind of hone my craft and sharpen my pencil in terms of my understanding of that aspect of the business. And once I did, it became my niche. And I would say from 2014 to probably 2022 and 23, the core of my business was working with developers and then turning that into a resale business. And I was able to grow a pretty good career on the back of that. And I think my best year was $300+ million as a solo agent. But when I partnered with John in 2020, it was around COVID time. In 21 and 22, we sold over a house a day. It was roughly 400 houses in 21 and 400 houses in 22, and just shy of $1 billion in both those years. And then ULA came into effect in 23, and then tariffs came into effect, and then you had obviously the fires in the Palisades, and just a lot of headwinds that have been happening in the city of Los Angeles. This looming mansionization ordinance, which was going to be referred to as the wildlife ordinance, and the development aspect of Los Angeles is really halted. And it's been very problematic, not just for myself, but for real estate in general in LA. And I do have this belief that if a city is not developing, it's inherently dying. And I feel like LA is at a crux right now because I don't believe we have a housing issue that people say we do. What we really have is a bureaucratic issue. And I'm not a political person, but things have gotten pretty out of hand here. And they are really bottlenecking the ability for the city to prosper, for the city to build, for the city to develop. And until some of these things get resolved, I don't know how it's going to get resolved, but it's going to be a pretty dire situation here for a period of time until it does. And not to say that the market's not going to be great. There's other aspects and tailwinds that help move this market along. We have interest rates coming down. We're going to have a new chairman of the Fed sometime in May. Looks like it's going to be Kevin Warsh, so we'll see how that goes. But ultimately, I feel like we're heading into a good season again. I just want to see things pick back up in terms of the growth of the city, because as far as I'm concerned, it is one of the greatest cities in the world, if not the greatest city in the world. And there's so many fantastic reasons to be here, but people have to want to be here. And if you don't have a government that's allowing people to live, prosper, and do business, I don't know what the future holds. So we'll see.
And it is a national podcast, so I was going to say it, but why don't you just explain what ULA is super quick? It's not going to be relevant to the whole audience, but at least they'll know what sort of bureaucratic stuff can happen in a particular area to slow things down.
So ULA is a measure that passed in 2022. It went into effect in 2023, and it's colloquially known as the mansionization tax or the mansion tax, but it actually affects every sector of real estate. It's not just single family housing, and it's not just residential. Commercial, industrial, office, multifamily. Anytime in the city of Los Angeles, as an owner, you sell a property, and the benchmarks keep moving just based on inflation, but I think now it's roughly at $5.5 million. When it started, it was $5 million. You pay a gross tax of 4% from the proceeds of the purchase price. And anytime it's north of, I think it's 10.3 now, give or take, it's 5.5%. So as an example, let's say you are a consumer, you bought a property prior to ULA and you paid $13 million, give or take. And something's happened in your life, circumstances have changed, the market has gone down, you now have to sell the property and the property is now worth $11 million. Well, great. You sell it for $11 million. You're already paying roughly 4 to 5% in commission, but you're now paying an additional 5.5% from that $11 million. So roughly $575,000 to $600,000 is coming off the top. It's going back to the city into this ULA coffer, and that money is set aside to build housing for the homeless, which is noble, except for the fact that we have a surplus of housing for the homeless. The issue we have with homelessness is that there's not enough programs to deal with mental health issues, with addiction issues. If the money was going there and it was actually serving a purpose in a program that made sense, probably wouldn't mind it so much if it wasn't so punitive. And it is highly punitive. If you're a developer and you're working on a 20% margin, well, your margin's just been cut to 14.5%, right? It doesn't really make a lot of sense to continue to work and develop in the city unless you're pocketing areas like Beverly Hills that are exempt or areas outside the city. So a lot of money is now moving outside of the city to periphery areas and out of state. So you look at areas like Florida, for example, which is booming. So much of the money and the development that should be happening in Los Angeles is now going elsewhere. In addition, there's now this looming billionaires tax, which is set to hit the ballot this November, assuming they get enough signatures. But just the threat of it has already uplifted so many of the ultra elite, ultra wealthy in California and pushing them out of state. Now, for the average person, who cares? However, there's major downstream effects that affects us in the state in totality. So prior to this being announced, there was roughly $2 trillion in taxable income just off of billionaires, their earnings, and their businesses. Roughly 60% have already left. And as a result, there's less than $1 trillion that's going to be taxable income for the state of California in every year moving forward. And that number is going to probably completely diminish, not just because that this will likely go into effect. I don't think it's going to go into effect, but just setting the precedent for it means it will likely come back on the ballot with more people behind it, more legal savvy behind it. And this isn't necessarily something that's put forward by the administration. It's put forward by
special interests.
Special interests, yeah, exactly. So, once they start to organize and they kind of move their interests together, it becomes a lot more powerful. And I think the threat of it alone is enough for people to say, I'm done. And if people that are sitting in Sacramento making the decisions aren't willing to stand up and say, hey, this is unacceptable, then I don't see any end to it. And all the ingenuity and innovation, the Teslas, the SpaceXs, the Googles, et cetera, are going to continue to move out of state, and it's just going to crush us.
One of the there's a couple of pieces of that mansion tax that make no sense at all, and one of them is So if the threshold, let's say the threshold is now 5.5 million, it's a 4% tax, but it goes back to $1. So it does make more sense if you say, okay, look, if you can afford a $6 million house, you should be able to afford to pay a little bit more tax to create housing for homeless. The problem is, if you sell a house for, it was 5 million, right? So I was going to,
versus 5. Right. I mean, right.
Well, that's what a lot of people are doing now, right? Like they're pricing it $1 below the threshold, or they're trying to figure out, okay, how can I hold title here where I can kind of circumvent this, whether it's as a tenant in common or selling off an LLC. So there's always going to be loopholes that people try to poke through, but the city has gotten very good at auditing that and making sure stuff like that doesn't happen.
It should be on the incremental amount, to your point.
It should be based on profit. Like you want to charge somebody 5.5 or even 10% of profit, that's fine. But if you're already losing money on a transaction, think of it like if you were investing in the stock market and you had a down year, you could offset that versus capital gains in a following year. I don't know how that works with ULA.
Yeah.
To be that punitive just doesn't make sense. And I think for the majority of constituents in Los Angeles, it's unconscionable.
Also, because it's not particular to asset class, it literally will keep buildings like, buildings downtown that downtown had there's been a downshift. What do we want? We want a vibrant downtown. So you've got, an office building that's 3/4 of the way built. You want somebody to come, you want a new developer to come in and save it, and rebuild it.
Diminishes incentive, it suppresses values, all of it.
And of course it's going to be more than, this massive office tower is definitely going to be more than the $10.3 million. So now you're looking at, a 5.5% tax on the total purchase price. So when somebody's underwriting that deal, I'm going to come in and save it and build here. Number one, they have to underwrite it completely differently. And then they have to figure, well, if our idea is to come in and save the deal, finish the construction, turn it from a blighted property into something great, and then we're going to turn around and sell it. Now they got to look at another 5.5% on the way out. Right. So now you're looking at an 11% tax when, a great turn might be 15%, for example, and people aren't going to put their hard-earned money into a deal unless they have the chance at 15%. It could go sideways. It could go wrong. The market could shift, all these different things. So that's why you need to have 15% if everything goes right. Now, you take 11% off of that. It's like, oh, well, if everything goes right, we're going to make 4%. People are like, forget it. I'll do something else.
Absolutely.
I don't know that I've sold a development deal since this has gone into effect, which is why my strategy has shifted more towards the business management side. And it's great because it's led to diversification, but I would love to see that sector of the industry come back. Some of the statistics were staggering, especially when it went into effect. And don't quote me on this because I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it was roughly the month before ULA happened, there was about 133 transactions north of $5 million. And granted, there was a lot of people pushing to the finish line to get their deal done prior to it going into effect. But the month after, it was 7. That's a pretty significant drop-off, right? I mean, it's actually a monumental drop-off. So as stated before, the bottleneck effect on this in the industry has been drastic. Now, those numbers have slowly started to climb back up again as the market has decided to absorb it, but nowhere near to the level that we've seen prior. And just the overall volume of deal in Los Angeles in the $5 million and up threshold has been greatly diminished since then.
Yep. Wow, interesting. Yep.
And just the income tax, and now the threat of a billionaire's tax, and people, I can understand people saying, okay, well, how much more money do you need? More than $1 billion? And yeah, okay, I can see that. However, if you make it so difficult for them if you make it much easier for them to live somewhere else, they're going to live somewhere else.
For sure. And it's not just them leaving, it's their businesses leaving. And what does that mean? So everyone that's employed in the state of California in those businesses no longer has a job here, or they have to leave as well and follow the business.
So just to come back to you got into it already from day one, thinking development.
Yep.
Tell us how you got your first development deal.
So I think it started.
How you work with your first developer, you know?
So it started rough, you know, like I had to kind of fly the plane as excuse me, I had to, what was that expression? Something like I had to build the plane as I was flying it, is I think basically what happened. So I think the first deal came on the back of an introduction that was made via friends. And, you know, I knew of this off-market property. I was able to sell that property to this one particular developer. I think he actually paid 3.1 for it. And it was great because it was the first deal I showed him. And, you know, usually in my experience, I had come very close and missed a lot. There was a few deals I had tied up and were in contract that didn't pan out for various reasons.
With this particular developer?
No, with different clients. With different clients. I was spreading myself everywhere. But this one finally hit. And when it did, I got to tell you guys, it was glorious, just absolutely glorious. It was so seamless and so simple. Everything just made perfect sense. It was a time in the market where there was deals aplenty. You just had to know where to find them. And he did relatively well on that. It was a simple remodel. It wasn't a ground up new construction. I think he ended up putting $1 million in just on a cosmetic renovation. And we ended up selling that property off for roughly $6.5 million. It was like 9 or 10 months later. And that ended up being, I think, my third listing in the business. And from there, I felt like I had figured out a formula, and then it just started falling into my lap in a sense. And I kind of cut my teeth and I honed my skills, and I really understood how to speak that language. And I feel like today, after 15 years of doing this, I speak it fairly well, fairly fluent in the development side of the business. And one of the most beautiful things about being an agent in Southern California, and really anywhere in the country, is I kind of joke about this, but being an agent, it's kind of like legal insider trading in a sense, because we see all the best deals that are getting ready to come to market before the general populace does. And you have a decision to make, which is, if the deal is really that rich, am I going to sell it off to a client, or am I going to just try and take it down myself? And having a brother who's become a fairly prolific developer in the city, it makes it very easy for me because everything I do, he comes in on. And we've tackled a lot of projects together. And I also had the opportunity to essentially act as what I describe as a proxy developer for what was the biggest developer in the city for a long period of time. And that experience was incredible to me. It was a real rocket ship. And sometimes you've got to be not just good, it's better to be lucky. And I feel like I was at the right place at the right time. And man, with this guy, we were buying things left and right. And I had to essentially go in on his behalf and act as the developer, meaning I was dealing with the architects, dealing with the contractors, dealing with the city, dealing with the designers. And part of my job was to take this asset from Genesis and bring it all the way to completion. I would earn my keep on the way in with the commission on the buy side. And all the work I did in between was pro bono. And I still do that for my clients all the time. I will happily sit in all those design meetings, whether they want me to or not. I kind of insist that I'm there at times. Most developers, in my experience, don't necessarily have a lot of experience, but they find the development side of the business very sexy. And unfortunately, there's a lot of ego in it, and a lot of people think they know better. And oftentimes, over time, after doing a bunch of deals, they will. But there's a lot of pitfalls at the beginning, from simple things like design and architecture to floor plan and how the house lives. And it really, if done right, should be an exercise of form over function, or function over form, I should say. If you get it right, you're going to get both. But understanding that a layout needs to make sense for a family and for the general populace, and you're not just building a house that's designed for the way you want to live, is sometimes very difficult for preliminary developers to understand. Mm-hmm. So getting on the other side of that and having a few successfully completed transactions that have been profitable gave me a lot of confidence to go back into the market and to double down on this. And that's really where I built the bulk of my business.
When you see a deal that you want to take down yourself, you're disclosing to the seller, hey, we're interested in this.
So I've never done it that way, candidly. If somebody's come to me with an opportunity to list a property, I never go to them and say, hey, I want to buy this. It's always come from another broker who has the opportunity. And this way I don't feel like I have a conflict of interest. I would feel okay doing that, but in a certain capacity, meaning if I had the representation of a listing and I had it on the market for a period of time and I knew it was a good buy and it wasn't going anywhere for whatever reason, at that point, I would probably be okay approaching the seller and saying, hey, if you're open to this idea, one of two ways I can do this. I can structure this to get you out altogether. I could leave you in the deal if you want to be a part of this LLC and we can go for the ride together. You put the property up, I'll take care of the actual building of it and I'll raise that capital and I'll syndicate. And then we kind of go out as a partnership. It hasn't happened yet, but I would certainly be open to doing it that way. But the one thing I learned a very long time ago is reputation is everything, not just in this business, but in life. And I never want to do anything to jeopardize that reputation. So I always make sure, and I think it's one of the reasons I love working with John. We're of the same ilk. In a very unscrupulous business, we always try to be the professionals in the room. And a lot of people will say this, especially when they're on podcasts, but you really got to walk your talk. And there's genuinely nothing more important to me than to make sure that the mark I'm leaving on the world and the way people remember me is as a mensch, doing things the right way and just like being able to sleep at night, because there's no greater sleeping pill than peace of mind.
And I always say, like, actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you say, right? So everyone says the right thing, or most do, and the actions really speak volumes. So coming back a little bit to that, when you're deciding, hey, my brother, yourself buying the deal, versus like how much of a competitive dynamic, how much influence do your developer clients, how much does it influence your developer clients when you're also buying some of the deals, and how do you communicate that? Like they ever feel like you're the competition, basically?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
I'm not this prolific developer who's like, buying these $20 million properties and building $100 million houses, which is where I tried to keep the core of my business for a long period of time. I've never been a big volume guy. I'm not the guy who's going to sell 70 or 80 properties a year by myself. Granted, in 21 and 22, that was a different conversation. But we have a really robust team that's certainly helped with that. Typically, the deals I'm buying are in the 3 to 4 range. They're quick remodels. And those are typically not the developers I work with. So I don't really have that issue. But there is one thing that I always do when I'm working with a developer, because it's very easy to talk up a property and sell it and say, yeah, on the way out, it's going to be $3,500 a square foot all day long. Anytime I have a developer client that is willing to take down a property that I believe in, that I am pitching, that I am quote unquote selling, and I never feel like I'm selling, I'm always advising, I'm always offering to go in the deal with them. I want them to know that I will put my money where my mouth is, and I will also have skin in the game, whether that's just rolling commission back into the deal, which I do all the time, or actually taking money from my accounts and putting it in addition. That's something that I always offer and I stand by, because I want them to know I believe in it, so much so that I'll put my own money in it. You
took that question right out of my, because that's where I was going to go next. How often are you a principal in these deals alongside your,
Often, and it's been a good business model for me, because the other thing it does is it secures the listing, right? So it's also just working smarter. There's always the risk. Look, loyalty is fly by night, right? And if you do your job well enough and people really trust you, our thought process here is not myopic. It's always more macro. There's no one deal that matters to me. If I take care of a client, I'm going to take care of them for the next 20 or 30 years. And if they genuinely know that I have their back and their best interest, I'm going to be working with them for a long time. One of the most powerful things I do as a broker is telling them, no, do not buy that. That's not the right house for you. That's not the right opportunity. And if somebody else is bringing them a deal and it's not me and it's a great deal, I'm going to tell them. I want them to do unbelievably well. There's enough for all of us to go around. It's all about relationships more so than anything else.
So I always come back to like what you exemplified clearly and what you just said is play the long game, because that's how you build trust in relationships. And it's like tell people the truth, not what's expedient in the moment and what you think they want to hear in the moment, which is what so many real estate agents do. They're just short-sighted.
Anytime I've ever counted my commission before the deal is closed, the deal falls apart. Every time. Like, it's Murphy's Law. I can't explain why. It just happens. I never do that anymore. And I treat this business like I'm completely outcome independent. I do my job to the best of my ability, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I can't control the uncontrollables, and that's fine. But ultimately, whether a deal falls apart or not, if I'm doing my job and I'm advocating for the client, then I'm going to have them on the next one, and the one after that, and the one after that.
I always say it's one of my favorite statements. Don't attach yourself to the outcome. Embrace the process and the actions that you can control, and let the rest do what it's going to do.
Tough lesson to learn early on in my career, because I have a lot of losses. And one of the best things about a partnership, and you guys work together, which is great. I work with John Grauman, greatest guy in the world, but you celebrate the wins together and you go through the losses together, and it makes the whole experience that much richer, whether good or bad, when you can do it with somebody.
Everything's relative. If you were always winning, you wouldn't appreciate the victories nearly as 100%. Much, right?
I'm telling you, I've got some rough ones. Like, we had a deal in 2022. We had a property we were on both sides of. It was a $58 million deal in the Hollywood Hills. This was a 5-month escrow. It wasn't meant to be, but it kept getting extended and extended and extended. The buyer eventually left the earnest money in the deal and then put up additional option money. They were in the deal for $3.5 million, non-refundable. It was a Chinese buyer. The Chinese government clamped down. Their fire insurance policy premium came back at $660,000. and the deal fell apart and we walked away with nothing. And that happens. And you have to give yourself a little bit of time to be upset about it. One of my mentors early on in the business said, allow yourself 24 hours to bitch, moan, and complain, freak the F out if you need to, and then you're over it. It's 1, 2, 3 over it, and you're moving on, and you're on to the next day, and you're on to the next deal.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. And also just going back to something that you said before, a couple of great ones. And one is sort of building to your client rather than your own taste. And that is a difficult thing for people to do because they think that, especially if they have a strong opinion, at least I know I don't know. I know it when I see it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But, I don't think that I know how to design it. So I have the benefit of knowing that I don't know, but keeping an eye on your avatar so that and I had a client that was, newly single, and he found this house in the Bird Streets. It was super sexy. And I just walked through and I'm just like, this is one of the best party houses. I understand where you're coming from, but like, how do you live here? What is this going to look like? Right. And he actually ended up buying it. But after I told him, please don't buy it. You're not gonna enjoy living here. And it wasn't 6 months until he was like, okay, now what do we do?
Yeah.
And then
he made the disclosure.
And then it was tough to get out of because it was a wonderful party house. And then people that come through, they're like, okay.
I mean, the spec game is relatively non-existent right now, but when it was at its peak, it had changed very dramatically from the time I got into the business to what the top was. And when I first started, it was try to build as much square footage as you possibly can, as the lot will support, including basements. You would have these 3 or 4 story houses that were 20 or 30,000 square feet. You build them as cheap as possible, and then you tried to take advantage of the margin just on the price per square foot because you have so much house. And that worked very well for a long time because these houses, which are just monoliths in the hills now, at the time were very attractive to people. The thing about modern architecture specifically is that it is inherently modern. It's of the time. And you can certainly do a timeless modern, but for the most part, that's not what we see here when we talk about spec. And spec has become kind of a very negative, dirty 4-letter word. And if you look back year over year, the houses that sell typically for the most money aren't the houses built by the speculators. They're the houses that are custom built by end users who put a lot of pride, passion, and a lot of money into the build, oftentimes double the price per square foot on the hard cost. And those will sell for super premiums. Almost any house you've seen in the city that's sold for north of $4,000 or $5,000 a foot wasn't a spec house, unless you have that rare developer that decides he's going to build this house as a custom house, and somebody's going to buy it because it's a one of one. And it's not necessarily 25,000 square feet. It might be a 10,000 square foot. I'm going to call it a jewel box, even though that's very big for a jewel box. But they're not going to get crushed by the law of diminishing returns. The more square footage you build, there's going to be a lot of compression on the price coming out on the price per square. Versus if you're building a 10,000 square foot beautiful property that takes into consideration the lighting, the landscape, the furniture, not just the square footage, and is built to the highest end of structural integrity and design integrity. That's what a really sophisticated, savvy, wealthy buyer is looking for. And that's something over time will trade for more and more and more as time and years go on. A lot of these spec houses, unfortunately, when you are the consumer of that and the buyer of that property, when you go to sell it 5 or 10 years later, you are oftentimes selling it for less than you bought it for because there's so much deterioration. The materials in that house aren't timeless. They're not meant to last, and they start to disintegrate and fall apart. We kind of have this funny joke about the modern spec houses in the hills. We talk about them as sugar cubes because they're these white boxes, and when it rains, they melt. They melt. And historically, the value is always going to be in the land. The property, the structure itself will depreciate unless it's something that is uniquely timeless and built to perfection.
It reminds me of, you think about it, depreciation of a car, buying a new car versus so and that's tremendous, insight.
But architecture, if done properly, will appreciate for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And won't melt away. Now, as cool as Adam is, and we know he's cool, and as much. A couple
guys just said he's the coolest guy I know. Literally, Mercedes and Griff just said that. Go ahead.
And coming from them,
I know, coming from them. Yeah, go ahead.
Tough audience.
Yeah.
Also given the tremendous volume of business that you do, the people that listen to this podcast are going to think that John and Adam roll into a, $30 million listing and, just like, oh, it's John and Adam that signed the papers. And you guys do a phenomenal business, and you're coming up against, I won't name the names, but 3, 4, 5 agents that just regularly have the 60, 70, $80 million listings. And we've experienced that too. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay, well, we listed it with this person and, they did nothing for us and and then the listing expires and they're like, we take the meeting or whatever. And they go, well, you know what? We're just going to go back to the same person.
Sure.
Because, they have a TV show or they have a certain reputation. Someone even said to me, and I was a little slack-jawed on the question. They're like, well, how are you going to negotiate with a billionaire? And I was like, you're asking me this? Like, you should be asking your current agent that because, of the various, the rooms that I've been in and walked in and where
the experiences you've had and then
versus what I know that they do. So how do you handle, Josh and I are partners. And we have $60 million. Let's say we did a spec house, $60 million. We didn't exactly do it the jewel box way. We maximized square footage, but we did some good stuff, but there's some weird stuff about it too. I'm thinking about a particular house, even, it's really great on one hand. On the other hand, there's some stuff that's really pretty dramatically wrong with it. It's probably worth close to, it's listed at 60. It didn't sell. We're the owners. We had it listed with one of the usual suspects. Nothing happened. The listing expired. We're going to take the meeting with Adam, but we're really leaning towards going back with the same old. How do you handle that?
So listen, there's an ask for every seat, right? That client might not be my client, but at the same time, there's only so much you're going to be able to say in a 30 to 40 minute conversation with the seller. One thing I do believe is I'm not a salesman. The only thing I'm ever selling is myself. And speaking back to reputation, I'm going to make sure I do everything in my ability to back up what I believe my reputation is. So I can't guarantee a positive outcome based on what's happening in the market. What I can guarantee is my effort. And what typically happens with a lot of the higher end listing agents in the city who are carrying 50 to 60 listings at a time is their sole job is to go and get listings. And they're going to take a bunch of stuff, throw it against a wall, and if 1 or 2 of them stick, fantastic. So it goes on the MLS, and they wait for the phone to ring. And if it does, somebody on their team is going to step in and take over. That's not how we operate. So we have kind of a rule where we're going to cap the amount of listings we take because there's only so much we're going to be able to cover and pay full attention to. It is still my belief that if marketing is done effectively, the selling aspect is somewhat superfluous. But there's so many aspects to what makes marketing effective. And there's no more effective marketing tool and strategy than pricing your house effectively and efficiently where it belongs in the market. Anytime I'm having a conversation with the seller, it's a very different conversation than I'm having with the general populace. With the general populace, I'm selling that property to the best of my degree. I'm a steward of that property. I'm making sure in the 45 minutes to an hour that I have with a buyer, I'm creating the best experience for them I can possibly create. I want to leave the best impression I can. It's essentially on their agents to have those conversations with them behind the scenes to do the quote unquote selling, if that's what they choose to do, to get them interested and bring them back.
Oh, okay, Adam. So we're still the property owners.
Yep.
I appreciate what you're saying. You have a great reputation. The person we went with, with the $60 million price tag, they're going to take it again at $60 million, by the way. And you know what, Adam? They have a Rolodex
Sure.
of billionaires that they know. And so they're going to really focus their marketing on that Rolodex. And how are you going to do better than that?
Well, let me ask you a question. How are they going to do that? And how can you prove that they're going to do that? And if you look statistically, what is the odds that the person representing your property is also going to be the person who's bringing your buyer? 5%? So if that's what you're focusing your attention on, unfortunately, I think it's focused in the wrong place. The way deals actually happen, genuinely, and I mean this, is still hand-to-hand combat. So the marketing can be very effective, especially if you're doing marketing outside the box, specifically today with video marketing, which I think is far more effective than the general pictures you're seeing, the Los Angeles Times advertisements, the MLS Caravan. All that's effectively doing is marketing the agent. It's helping them to build their own business. I can promise you there's nobody buying your property because it's been put in the Los Angeles Times. The way deals still happen is by your agent not being lazy, picking up the phone, hopefully having great relationships with other brokers in the community, and not just relying on the MLS to sell the property. If I have to sit on a property 4 to 5 hours a day, 20 to 30 days out of the month, and I'm being serious, and tour brokers through one at a time so that it's top of mind for them, so that I can actually spend 30 minutes with them and have conversations about who might you have for this. And if you don't have somebody right now in this moment, the next time you get a phone call from somebody and they're saying, hey, I'm looking for this $60 million type property in the hills, what's the first property on your minds? Otherwise, it's an afterthought. They can just go on the MLS and find all the properties that are out there and show those properties, but I want to be the first one they think of. In addition to that, I want to make sure I'm creating an experience for them where they want to call me because they know I'm going to be a person they want to work with. I'm going to work with them to get the deal done as opposed to create those problems, to solve those problems, to go prove to my client what a great agent I am. I think of myself as an agent's agent more than anything else. And what often gets overlooked in our business is the relationship that you need to have with the other brokers in the community. Sure, to a degree, we're all competing with each other, but we're all peers. We're all in the same space. There needs to be a mutual respect between all of us. And I can tell you this, some of the best friends I have in life, in addition to the kids I grew up with and the people I went to college with, are the people I work with. And if you're not making meaningful lifelong relationships, what are you doing? There's a lot of ways to be rich in life. But in my estimation, the most impactful way is to be rich in relationships.
Yeah. And basically you're leveraging the broader real estate community by just having great relationships with cooperating agents. I mean, that's just smart business. And how often do we talk about how important the relationship is with other agents and how so many agents are short-sighted in that respect?
How many times have you heard somebody say, man, like I really want to show my client this house, but I don't want to deal with that guy. I don't want to deal with that guy.
And people, clients do not, homeowners do not understand. I still need an effective way or a more effective way of communicating to them. Now you're the homeowner. Okay.
The 5% you're speaking of.
Yeah. Now you're the homeowner. Okay. And look you might also be nervous because you have a lot of money into this deal.
Yeah,
You've got business partners that are, nipping at your heels. If you get out, you had it at 60 million, it's a super healthy profit. If you get out at like 45, 48, you're at like a break, you're making an okay profit, something like that. So, it's nerve wracking and you're the homeowner.
Yep.
And what I want to say to you is, hey, you tried it with Mr. or Ms. Smith and at 60 million, it didn't work. I know they have a bunch of listings at this price point. Let's step out of, we'll step out of the scripts for a moment. We'll step out of the role play for a moment. And what I want to say to Adam is, dude, as your brother, okay, Ms. Smith is a tyrant, okay? And agents hate her. And, and if there's a property that's anywhere equivalent, they're gonna take their buyer and they're gonna run to something else.
Sure.
So if you don't hire the two of us to rep you, like just run some names by me because, you've got to have somebody that people. How do you communicate that?
By the way, I do this all the time. Like literally as I'm leaving that presentation, I will say to them, if for whatever reason we are not the guys for you and you feel compelled to do this, I just want you to know as a resource, I'm there for you. Feel free if you would like, and if you feel that there's trust in this room, to let me know who else is in contention, and I will give you my honest, impartial take of who would be the best fit for you.
Okay, I get that. I've done that. But the problem that we're having in this instance is Adam, the seller, already signed up with the jerk realtor one time and now is going to re-sign with that same jerk realtor, but feels compelled, or maybe his partners feel compelled, he's going to interview a couple of people before he goes back to jerk realtor A, which he started with. So I can walk out the door and say, hey, Adam, listen, whoever you're going to go with, there's trust in the room, which there was, there is trust in the room. How do you communicate, first of all, the importance of that relationship with the realtor and the community, and if you don't pick us, it's okay, but you got to pick somebody that's going to really pour into this property. Help us with that script.
Me personally, I do it very candidly, the same way I just spoke it to you guys. One rule we have is we will never speak in a derogatory manner about any of our competition. To me, it's just not a good look. It's unprofessional. People do it all the time. I think it's unfortunate. The other thing I would say is you have to rely on the data. So if you've given it 6 months or a year, I understand more than anybody that at these price points, the houses don't sell themselves, and they don't always sell right away. And oftentimes it could be a multi-year process. There's this funny expression in our business, and probably in most businesses, and I think it was Jeff Hyland who penned this, who is a legend in our business. And it was something along the lines of, it's better to be the firstborn, the second wife, and the third listing agent. In a situation like this, what I would say is the one thing you can track is how many people have come through the door. Are you doing showings? Are there private broker previews? It's not enough to have a brokers open and have 100 brokers through, but what is the cadence of showing? If you're not showing the property, and it's different at a $60 million price point, but if you're not showing it ideally at least 2 or 3 times a month, there's something wrong. Nobody can control the outcome of a transaction, but what you can control is effort. And even if that showing is just a one-on-one broker preview, to be able to hold an agent accountable to that, to make sure he's doing the things that are tried and true, that isn't just the social media posts and the Instagram posts and the caravan ads, but actually tangibly getting people on the property. If that's not happening, regardless of the price point, regardless of the property, something is wrong. And if that's not happening, I would urge you and encourage you, as somebody who, we don't necessarily have a fiduciary relationship with one another yet, but as somebody who genuinely cares and wants to see you do well, take a long, hard look at what you're doing, because there's a lot of money at stake, and it's not as simple as throwing it up there and just waiting for the phone to ring. That's not how things get done here.
So let me ask you, which circles back to this, tying into like your partnership with John and your team, and then so I want to hear a little bit about that. But leading into that a little bit, you said you limit the number of listings you guys have.
And I just want to close the loop again, being very mindful of the audience. And that is, if you're, Josh and I happen to be friends with, I'm very good friends with a realtor in Omaha, Nebraska.
Sure. Who,
at one point in time sold 1,000 homes in a year. So he is a rock star, and those price points are very different. So the conversation that Adam's having, it works if your luxury price is 1.2 million and you're selling at 600,000. Now you get this listing appointment at 1.2 million, and now Mr. or Ms. Smith Realtor has, 7-8 listings at the 1.2 million range. You don't have any, but you're selling regularly 600,000-700,000. This is the same exact dialogue that you have. And, to that point, one of the things that this is another, and I appreciate you saying, it's just a bad look to say bad things about people, even if they are lousy, realtors. Like they're great at getting the business, and how well do they service it? One of our realtor friends was competing against one of these folks that we know, and it was a lower price point, which is like $22 million,
sure.
Right? And
price point.
And I will say that our friend said they decided to go with the other realtor. And our friend said, look, let me just tell you what's going to happen, okay? And it is a guy. So this guy's going to come in. He's going to sign, because you've decided to go with him, okay? And I respect that, even though I think you should go with me instead, because our guy's pretty aggressive. And here's what's going to happen. He's going to come in. He's going to come with the paperwork. You're going to sign the paperwork. You're never going to see him again.
Right.
And you're never going to talk to him again. And you're off to somebody, you may think he's better than me. I don't, but trust me, number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on his team, definitely not better than me. And you're never going to see this guy again after you sign up the paperwork. And he told me that he said that. And I was like, wow, okay. Because he was like, oh, I'm vying for this listing. And then he called me back. He goes, hey, you know what? I got the listing. I was like, really? That's cool. That was fast. What happened? He goes, oh, well, I told the lady who was selling the house that the last time they were going to see him was when he came to sign the paperwork. And guess what? She said, okay, come on over and sign the paperwork. And he already sent his number 2 just to even get the paperwork signed. And so when the number 2 shows up at the house, she's like, hey, you know what? Yeah. I got to think about this a second. And then she called our friend, was like, hey, get over here and sign the paperwork before, Mr. Number 1 wakes up for a nanosecond to strong arm us into it. And so that's how he got that listing. Another thing that we see is, and this will go into Josh's point about limiting the number of listings. Another thing that we see, and I think you can leverage as a big realtor. I'll go back to Omaha, to my friend. I'll shout his name out, Jeff Cohn. Jeff at one point in time did 1,000 deals. This man was so systematized, that of course he's not holding open houses, okay? And yet when we walk into, it's become a very sad running joke for the two of us, is we'll go into these houses and it'll be listed by a great agent, really, truly, somebody we like, we know. It's listed by an Adam or a John, we go in and it's like the person holding the open house is like, they don't even look up
to say hello.
And then there was another one, one of the ones where we bumped into you, I think, and you weren't the listing agent. We bumped into you, or it was another house along the way, and the people holding the open house actually were like, they're on their feet and they're cool and they're like, hey, welcome to the house. It was all good. And we're like, how many square feet is the house? They're like, oh, I don't know. and then they look on the sheet and they tell us how many square feet it is. We're like, okay, does that include the ADU? Or, it's like it's an expensive house.
It's so funny because it's true. What can you say?
Pervasive.
It goes back to what I was talking about earlier about, just the barrier of entry into the business. Unfortunately, it's just unbelievably low.
And how, and we're like, okay, well, is the back house, because it's not even an ADU, this is like a mansion with a big back house. Is the back house, is the square footage in the back house included in this, in the 15,000 square foot figure you quote us? Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know. You're like, okay, well, you get an A for greeting us at the door, and like a D- for knowing the first thing about the property.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a certain archetype of personality that I feel like does very well in this business. If I am a seller and, I am interviewing a bunch of agents, for me personally, knowing what I know, I would much rather hire the very young and hungry agent. Doesn't even necessarily have to be young, but just the hungry agent who doesn't necessarily have the biggest book of listings. What they do have is a track record of grit and of hustle. Ideally, they have transactions under their belt. Oftentimes, it's going to be transactions or deals that are harder to sell, but the effort that they put in to moving that product is clearly working. And oftentimes, when you're hiring one of these much larger agents that are carrying 40 or 50 properties at a time, and they have 10 properties that are $60 million, and it's a competitive product to what you have, how much do they really care? Versus, what is that young agent going to think and care about, right? To them, that deal is everything. They're going to put every last ounce of their effort and their energy into making that transaction happen, like their life is on the line, because for some of them it is. They're backed into a corner. They need to make this happen to survive. Most agents fall out of the business right before they're about to break through. think the average time frame for most is like just under 2 years. And at least for me, in my experience, that's when things started to turn. And I definitely had those thoughts early on. And I'm not saying you want to hire somebody who's never sold a deal before, but somebody who's on an upward trajectory. Maybe they are a B or B plus tier agent. They're kind of breaking into the top 100, but you could see they have that grit, they have the skill set, they have what it takes. And ideally, there's a level of sophistication. I genuinely believe that what we do on a day-to-day basis, it's not rocket science, but it does require a certain level of sophistication to do it efficiently, to do it well, to be organized enough to understand your business, to know the core tenets of what you're doing on a daily basis, to make sure you know the statistics, and to genuinely be a steward of the seller in that process of transaction.
Yeah.
And if you treat it like a business, like a profession, as opposed to, yeah, I'm going to sell a couple houses a year and then I'm going to F off to Bali and enjoy my time until I run out of money and then come back. Or you're one of these mega agents who is accumulating listing after listing after listing, and it's just going into the broader marketing machine, but there's no personal touch. That would never work for me. And it would never work for me as a seller, and it certainly doesn't work for me as an agent. When I'm dealing with a client, the only person on my team they will ever talk to is me. That's it. I'm the quarterback. I am the CEO of selling their property. And it is a collaborative process. I want their feedback. I want their input. It's their asset. There's a few things they control in the process. It's essentially what they're going to ask, what they're going to accept, and the condition of the property. Almost everything else is up to me and up to the market. So I better make damn sure that the part that I have and the part I control is done to the utmost perfection that I have control over with it.
Love it. So, which also segues into where I was before. Tell us a little bit about the origins of your partnership with John and how that has evolved and what that looks like and how you leverage one another.
So John and I came into the business around the same time. John had a background in the mortgage side of the business. I think he was on the lending side for like 8 or 9 years. And roughly 2011, 2012, he had just actually done a spec house, which did very well in the Sunset Plaza area. And I think he had hired some agents from the agency and was really interested in what they were doing and how that was all unfolding, and decided he was going to shoot his shot in real estate. And I was a young up-and-comer who, you guys have my history, kind of was starting out. And at some point around 2014 to 2015, we crossed paths. I think I had a listing up in like Beverly Hills Post Office on Laurel Way. And he came to the open house and we just got to chatting. And me being kind of the affable, friendly person that I strive to be, and John being who he is, which is the consummate professional, always a smile on his face, incredibly gifted orator. He's incredibly articulate, speaks unbelievably well. I always joke that if he had different ambitions, he would have been a great politician, an honest politician, but a great politician, if such a thing exists. And we just kind of consummated a friendship immediately. And, I say friendship, but I think for a long period of time, we were kind of acquaintances, friends. And then as time went on, we got to know each other better. There was a period in around, I guess it was around COVID time, maybe a little bit earlier, where John was going up for a very large listing. And it was on the development side of the business. So he reached out to me just to see if I would sit down with him to just provide some, of my perspective and pointers and thoughts and, what might be some compelling points for him to talk to and going out to try to get this property. And we spent a good amount of time together there. He ended up getting it. And I think in the back of his mind, he always held a sense of gratitude because of that. And around 2020-ish, 21-ish, I closed a really big deal. I was on both sides of the transaction. It ended up being something like $80 million. It was like 40 and 40. And the first person that called me was John. And he's like, man, I just want to tell you, bro, I'm so proud of you. Congratulations. And he didn't say it in a condescending way. He just said it in a way that was like, obviously, like to some degree, we're all competitors, but it's so good to see the good people in the business doing well. And I just want to take you to dinner to celebrate. And I was like, great, man. Thank you so much. I was so appreciative. And we had built this mutual reverence and respect for one another. And in the process of that dinner, a couple drinks in, he just kind of blurted out this thought. He was like, hey, man, would you ever consider partnering? And at the time, he had run into Zillow Flex, and he was building this really robust machine. And he had a team of 18 people, and the market was starting to take off. And there were deals coming in left and right, and he was getting overwhelmed. And I guess he had thought about if he was going to do something like this, who would be the person that he wanted to do it with? And I'm sure there was a short list, but I had a team of roughly 8 or 9 at the time. And We kicked the tires on this for about 6 months, and we poked every hole in it possible. And there was some other opportunities at the time out there for me that I was looking at from a partnership perspective. But my gut kept bringing me back to John because of who he is as a person and just how impressive I think he is. And I say this with no hyperbole. If I was Mr. Seller and there was one person in the market that I would trust to sell my asset because he has such a high give a shit factor, it's John Grauman. And we decided to do this. I guess it was like early 2021 or late 2020. And I could tell you guys definitively, it's the best thing that I've ever done in my career. The synergy we have together is palpable. When we're in a room together and we are pitching or presenting, the way we play off one another is fantastic. We have figured out one another's cadence. I always joke and say John is always the smartest guy in the room. I feel like a total plebe next to him because he is so impressive, just the way he is with his written word and his spoken word. But there's something about him dynamically, the way he conveys his thoughts and the way he demands and commands trust. And he doesn't do it via assertion. He just does it because that's his presence. And you know that when you are in his hands, you are going to be taken care of. And for me to attach myself to that was a no-brainer. In addition to that, behind the scenes of Resident, we have an unbelievable team, and that is led by John's wife, Lauren. So I actually have 2 business partners, which I think a lot of people don't realize. I have John, and then I have Lauren. And Lauren is the CEO. She runs the ship. So from the business perspective, it allows me to be me, to be in the field every day, to cater to clients. I don't have to get so involved and stuck in the weeds of the business because Lauren is a master operator. She is a visionary. And where she points her compass, that's where we go. And we always say, we're just running our own race. We're not worried about what everyone else is doing. You know, we are a boutique brokerage. We love the idea of being boutique. It allows us to be nimble. We're roughly 25 agents right now. We're a staff of, I think, 7 or 8. And we're not trying to be the next Douglas Elliman. We're not trying to be Carrollwood. We're not trying to be Beverly Hills Estates. We're not trying to be Compass. We're just trying to be Resident. And we're trying to be John and Adam and the agents that put their trust, faith, and support in us. And we do it a little bit differently. There's a lot of accountability at Resident. So, you know, I think most traditional brokerages, you come in, you know, you have your office manager, you're going to negotiate your split, and then it's like, good luck, get out there and be somebody. And if you're lucky and if you have a great manager, you're going to have some mentorship. We're a very structured program for our agents. So we don't bring in brand new agents. We ideally want to see at least 2 years of experience. We want to see at least $10 million of GCI in the last 12 months and at least 5 transactions, because that tells me that they're out there, they're hungry, they're hustling, they're making things happen, and they're producing more than 95% of the agents out there. Most people have a good Rolodex. They don't necessarily know how to tap into it. So to a large degree, we are a coaching brokerage, and you are going to have meetings with Jenny, our who I'm going to call office manager. She's really more team mom on a bi-monthly basis. We are going to talk about your marketing. We are going to set you up for success, and we are going to allow you to do more things that are income producing so you're not so bogged down in the weeds. For example, you put a property in escrow, you have inspections, you're not dealing with that. You're not scheduling that. We are. So we're going to take care of all that for you. We're going to review those reports, and we're going to provide you with a summary so that you can then go back to your client and you have everything you need in order to be able to communicate effectively. But you don't have to waste so much of your time sitting in that inspection for 6 hours. That's taken care of for you. That's just one small example of, you know, I think one of the value adds that we provide to agents.
Do you send someone on the team that is an expert at sitting inspections?
Yep, we have that person. Oftentimes the client wants the agent to be there. If they need to be there, that's fine. Totally okay with that. But we just don't want them to be so bogged down in the minute details of filling out paperwork. And, you know, we have people that are specifically there to handle this part of the business for them because they're going to do it better than they do. If you're an effective agent, you want to be focused on income producing activities. You can't be the best transaction coordinator. You can't be the best marketer. You can't be the best at showings. You have to focus and hone what you're the best at and then cater to that. That's my philosophy, at least. But you have to be able to wear all hats. You have to know about all of it, but it doesn't mean all your time needs to be spent in it.
Do you hold them accountable to lead generation?
Absolutely.
Tell me what does that look like?
So there's a couple of things we bank on. Sphere of influence is the biggest one. We always want their business to be as organic as possible. We're always encouraging them to get out into the world, again, to work smarter in addition to working harder. We also provide a lot of leads for them. So it goes both ways. It's multifaceted. Because we are a Zillow Flex team, and I say team, we're really a Zillow Flex brokerage, I think one of the big value adds we provide to our agents is the opportunity to transact very early on and to get additional lead sources. And Zillow Flex has been fantastic for us. We've transacted a lot via Zillow Flex and some very high-end transactions. I think we've even transacted one deal as high as $75 million that came in as a Zillow lead. You'd be surprised what kind of clients will call in via Zillow. When you have a client who isn't local to Los Angeles and they don't necessarily have an agent relationship, but they are a titan of industry, they're going on Zillow just like everybody else. And they're shopping on Zillow or they're shopping on Redfin, and they will push that button that says, I'd like to see this property. The phone will ring to our office, and sometimes I am amazed at who is on the other line. So we'll have an ISA team that comes in, they answer those calls, they will vet that lead. Once that lead has been warmed and it's been vetted, it's passed off to the agent. The agent owns that lead, they will work that lead. The conversion rate is usually roughly around 3%. It's not high, but there can be a lot of leads in the pot, and we are always harping on them to be engaging or re-engaging constantly. The beauty of Zillow is after a 2-year period, you own that lead fully. So it allows them to build their book of business organically in that 2 years comes and passes, Zillow's cut is off, and they now have that client ideally for life if they're serving them right. And based on our instruction and our tutelage, we feel like they are set up in a way that they're going to be very successful in this business for a long time.
Coming back to Paul's question, do they have to do any of their own prospecting?
Yeah. So look, we're never going to require anybody to do anything as long as they're productive, right? So if you're already a productive agent and you have a book of business, by all means, do what is effective for you. I was never the best prospector. I was never great at door knocking. I was never a cold caller. I always found it to be so awkward. But there's some people that really succeed at that, and they really buy into it, and they put all their time, their energy, and their passions into it. And for them, that's great. And we certainly have that as a tool in the toolkit. And there are a select group of agents at Resident that will hone in on that, and we encourage that. But for the most part, there's lots of other revenue streams and sources of income and spheres that people can tap into. So whether that's being part of different social clubs, or it's being part of professional organizations, or it's cold calling, and this isn't necessarily super effective, but if you're going to cold call people who are going to provide an audience that can generate business, whether that's business managers, attorneys, wealth advisors, et cetera. We want to be pillars in the community. We're always harping on community service. We do things together as a collective unit that are community service oriented, which is a double-edged sword, candidly. It gives back to the community. It also provides great exposure for us in the community. But we want active agents. What we don't want are passive agents. So part of their one-on-ones that happen on a bi-weekly basis is business planning. And it's about working the sphere you have, using a CRM to stay highly organized within that sphere, and making sure you are inputting all new relationships and contacts back into that CRM. And then the question becomes, what is organic to you as an individual to increase that sphere? What can you lean on? If it's cold calling, great. If it's door knocking, great. If it's socializing, great. If it's playing golf, great. Whatever that is, we want you to lean into that, something that caters to your personality, to the unique things that make you who you are.
I always say I can't help myself. Who's ever having the most conversations is doing the most business. However that comes.
For sure.
It's tried and true.
Yeah.
What CRM do you use?
Follow Up Boss.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we know the CEO, the founder of Follow Up Boss, had a great sale to Zillow, and Zillow requires you to use Follow Up Boss, but you use that for the rest of your.
It kills two birds, one stone for us. Mm-hmm. Zillow requires it. We've been using it for a long time, anyways. We just found it to be the most effective in terms of products that's out there that we've seen. It's very easy to use. Honestly, I feel like a chimpanzee could use it. Once you have an hour tutorial with it, it becomes second nature. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it just keeps everybody hyper organized, and it makes it seamless. Every day, this is who you need to reach out to. And it just sets everything up on a cadence for you. So depending on what your check-in schedule is, whether it's bi-weekly or bi-monthly, you can set every client differently. Every day, it's going to show up, and you know exactly what you need to do. And it just kind of makes it dummy-proof.
Mm-hmm. What's the vision for Resident? What does the ideal world look like for Resident 3 years from now, 5 years from now?
It's a great question. And candidly, I don't know the answer. We kind of take one day at a time. I think John would answer this question very differently than I do. I am somebody who tries to live in the moment. I don't have these long-term 5-year goal aspirations. I could tell you that there's so much opportunity in our backyard here that I don't want to spread myself thin in Los Angeles. I really want to be not even an expert, because I don't think of myself as an expert. I just want to be an enthusiast of Los Angeles real estate. Mm-hmm. John is now spending his time between Napa and Los Angeles. So Resident Napa will be opening at the beginning of the year, which is a really interesting second office for us because there's a good amount of business that transacts between both those markets, Napa being a secondary and tertiary market. And then me being from Miami, there's been so much movement towards Florida because of some of the things we discussed earlier that are happening bureaucratically here in California, that I feel like it would be remiss for me to not take advantage of the opportunity and diversify my business to South Florida. So that's certainly in the works for me. I think,
which is where you're from. So for
which
those
is where I'm
that,
from.
yeah.
So I think you will see Resident plant a flag in South Florida potentially sometime later this year. And then in addition, we really just want to focus on coastal California. So one of the things we will do in every market we move into is bring on a strategic partner in that market. They kind of run the show. We put a lot of faith and trust in them. We are not micromanagers. It just has to be somebody who is of our ilk and of our same philosophy and thought process. But long term, I'd love to have a presence in Orange County, a presence in Santa Barbara, Montecito. We'll have Northern California, we'll have Florida, and I'm good. I'm not trying to be this massive conglomerate, as mentioned before, I'm not trying to be Compass. I just want to have a really great, efficient, kind of family-owned business. And if we can have some downstream businesses as a result of that, some ancillaries like escrow and potentially estate property management, those are things I'd be happy to look into. But one of the things I really like about the aspect of Resident is, yes, we work together on a daily basis as agents, but one of the opportunities I want to provide is the ability to develop together. So talking about these opportunities that I see, that we can bring to fruition from genesis to completion, if I'm going to go out there and try and generate capital and raise money and syndicate, why not do that amongst our agents? If there's the ability for everybody to put in and collaborate and make money together in an additional revenue stream just outside of buying and selling, fantastic. Nothing would make me happier.
We have, for the first time, being in the brokerage business for me for 25 years, and John was the lender in my office.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, that's how I originally.
Was that at PLG?
No, it was. What firm was he with?
It's not PLG. It was Peter Lorimer at the time. I think is where he. Oh, he was at Keller Willians.
Keller Williams, Beverly Hills. Yeah.
Before my time, but
he was, and he. I know you know this, but he was an A+. He was an A+ there, and anyway, it's sort
funny
of
how you talk about him being a great, so smart, so bright, so articulate, and whatever. I mean, talking about we're speaking to an awfully articulate dude right here,
sure.
And then we have a lot of frame of reference.
But John he's genuinely a thought leader in this space.
Yeah.
That's how I think of him.
Yeah,
learn from the best.
I love it.
Talent attracts talent. Environment matters. That's what I wear on my wrist.
Yep, well said.
One question. It's funny because I was on this panel. It was years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And what happened was, they looked at the volume that people did, and I think this is just a guess, but I think they confused the volume that my firm did with the volume that I did. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't focused on selling it at all at the time. So, I'm on the panel with, the people that do, $1 billion or whatever, plus. And, so there's 7 or 8 of us, but maybe less, five or six people, all of whom you would know. And they gave us some of the questions in advance. And one of them was, if they dropped you into a new city and you didn't know the city and you knew no one, what would you do? And because I got the question in advance, I actually prepped that question because I'm like, I don't know what I would do. Because our business model in the brokerage is really getting the business with the best agents that we can, as opposed to generating a new business. So
which is what I did.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've started from scratch in the brokerage for sure. Yeah. No question about that. When I started with Keller Williams, 25 years ago, it was nobody had ever heard of us. So that was the question that they asked. I had prepped for it. I'll give you one. I'd like to know your answer. I'll give you one funny / sad anecdote, which was, it was a room full of 2,000 people. I would imagine at least half of them or more were new or newer realtors. and they're really looking for this panel for some wisdom on the answer to this question. And it came to me like third or whatever, as they do. And the first two people said, "Oh, you parachute me into a new city to whatever. The first thing I'd do is like, dude, I'd jump off a cliff." That was it. And
it's a horrible answer.
Terrible.
Horrible answer.
Horrible answer. And it was, when you saw them answer that way, and the kind of business that they have in LA, that they had started, quite a bit, probably quite a few more years in it than you, maybe double the years. And they had ground it out so hard for so long to get to like this place where they sit on this panel.
The thought of starting over.
Yeah, the thought of starting over. Like when they said, it's like, seriously, jump off a cliff. I'd put a gun to my head. Like these are the first two answers. And then, then they kind of went into what they would do a little bit. But I'm interested in your answer.
Well, I can tell you because I'm kind of about to do it. Granted, it's different because, Miami is home and I know it very well. It's not a city that I've lived in for a very long time. But assuming it wasn't Miami and I was somewhere else, and I presume what you're saying is if I was going to start the practice of real estate again somewhere else, first thing I would do is check my ego at the door and understand the success that I've had in this market isn't necessarily going to translate right away to the success in a new market. And I would allow myself to buy my time. It's not going to happen right away. But the first thing I would do from an action point of view is I would start reaching out to other brokers in the community. And I would start trying to generate relationships from those brokers, because the most I'm going to be able to learn about my business is going to come from the people that are in that business and the people that have been successful in my business. So I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to allow myself to get educated. Not all markets are equivalent. They're certainly not synonymous. I know there's skill sets that I will be able to bring to the new market. And I know that I can probably speak in a sophisticated manner about the nature of real estate, but I don't understand the things about each unique market that make those markets unique. And those are the things I want to learn. I'd also eat my way through that city, just being the foodie that I am. And I feel like being out and about in social atmospheres and engaging with people over broken bread or a drink or two is probably a very great way to break the ice. I happen to be an introverted person by nature, so I have to force myself to play the extrovert. And I find there's no better way to do that when you're breaking bread with somebody. One of the things I hate the most is going to these networking events, which I go to a lot, and I used to be a wallflower. But some of these events allow situations where they do lunches as opposed to let's all get in a room and have a drink and talk to each other about where we're from and what we do and whatever. There's something about having a captive audience when you're at a table kind of like this where personality shines and you really have the opportunity to make real connections. So in a social atmosphere, I find that's the best way. So if I'm putting those two together, I think what I would do, and I say this kind of politely, but I would harass a bunch of local top agents and I would take them out. Let's go grab a drink. Let's grab dinner. I'm sure there's a lot I can learn from you. Maybe there's something you can learn from me. Always happy to pay back the favor. But one of the things I love the most about what I'm able to do at Resident is the ability to mentor, the mentorship component of the business. When I started in the business, as I mentioned, I emailed a lot of people. I didn't get any responses, and that sat with me. And if I had to do it again, I'm sure there'd be some scar tissue there. So for anybody listening to this, and I mean this sincerely, reach out to me. You shoot me a message on Instagram, I'm going to reach back out. I'm going to respond. If you're in town and you want to grab a cup of coffee and pick my brain, I will find the time to do that. And I stand by that. So I hope that somebody would pay that forward. And if I'm in a new market, I would expect the same in return. At least I would hope for it.
It's so funny. I've given that advice so many times to new agents I brought on board. I'm going to tell you the names of the top producers in this office and just go ask them if they'll give you an opportunity to earn 30 minutes of their time for coffee. Yeah. And how few agents do it. Like almost none.
It's scary. I mean, to lean into that anxiety is not an easy thing. I can certainly relate to it. I think there is this expectation that especially in this business, it's very sharky and it's cutthroat. And I certainly have my experiences with that, but there are a lot of great people in this industry, genuinely, and you will find your tribe.
I was going to press you more on it too, because going into a new city and finding those agents to mentor you, it's one thing saying it. How do you do it? So I'm glad you pressed into it. I have a script which I've used, relatively infrequently, but it's worked every time I've used it. And that is, what do I need to do to earn the right to spend 30 minutes with you? Mm-hmm. And just asking it that way, most people just say, well, you know what, you already have. And then sometimes they'll say yes, and then you got to really chase them to death to actually get the sit down. And then my further advice is when you get the sit down, it was somebody as huge as John Maxwell, who's sort of again, I haven't seen his stuff out as much, but he's written probably 50 New York Times bestsellers or something crazy like that. And he, way back in the day, used to get, one lunch a year with John Wooden. And what he would do is he would go in with a paper and he had all of his questions ready. And he's like, Coach Wooden, I want to schmooze with you, because he's a schmoozer, John Maxwell. He's like, I want to schmooze with you. I want to, talk about the kids and the dogs and the whatever. But, I've got you for 20 minutes and I've got 20 minutes worth of questions. You want to schmooze with me after? Let me fire through them. And he was really prepared. And when John Wooden was answering the questions, he was writing all the answers down, and he was very grateful. And the other thing too, and this is a Maxwell story. He was coaching with somebody who had recently become a New York Times reporter in the finance section, and the person was like, now I'm finally, I'm like top of the food chain on the Wall Street Journal finance beat. Like, I'm getting the interview with Warren Buffett because I've always wanted it anyway. And they're like, okay, well, you'll have 20 minutes with Mr. Buffett, 14 months from now. And they're like, I'm the reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Like, are you serious? They're like, yes. And then prior to that meeting, this reporter called Warren Buffett's assistant or whoever set up the meeting and said, hey, listen, I want to bring him something. Like, what can I bring him? Da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, people ask us that all the time. He doesn't want anything. Trust me. There's nothing. And she just pressed and pressed until the woman's like, I mean, he loves cherry Coke. What do you want me to say? And so the woman comes in and using Maxwell's advice with John Wooden, the woman comes in and says, like, Mr. Buffett, we have 20 minutes. I'm not going to waste your time. Pulls out like a thermos, has like the cold, cherry Coke, cracks it open, pours it over the ice, slides it across the table. He's like, I know cherry Coke's your favorite. Here you go. So let's get into the questions.
Brilliant.
And as the story goes, Warren Buffett spent like an hour and a half with her instead of 20 minutes or whatever. So that is lead with contribution, lead with humility,
lead with curiosity, and ultimately take initiative. Nothing's going to fall in your lap. You got to go out, and the right people, to your point, will respect that. They will reciprocate big time. That kid right there, I met at Sweet Green. He took initiative to ask me about what I did and whatever, wanted to get into real estate. He's sitting right there with an internship because he took initiative, followed up. I'm intentional about testing them. Follow up with me in 2 days because it's the truth. Like, I'm busy. Call me at such and such a time. And how often that doesn't happen. And when it does, it's rewarded.
A top leader taught me, because with the size of our brokerage, a lot of people will ask me if I have time to sit down and give them some advice. And I've done it so many times and been so frustrated by it. There's a story that I tell, which, happened a few years ago, and I went, and I met with this person, and part of my like big why was, I like to help people, I want to help them in their career. This is part of, like, if you said, what's your big why? That was part of it. And then I went to this meeting, and, after 20 minutes, I was like, okay, you know what? Like, I really want to be honest, at least with myself. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I walked out of the meeting. I was like, you know what? I don't like to help people. I'm crossing it off the list. Like, seriously, I'm too old for this, whatever. And then Josh and I were early in our business relationship, and Josh called me. He's like, hey, I need help with XYZ. And I'm like running over to help Josh. I'm like, wait a minute. I do like this. And then that's where I came up with the saying of, I like to help the willing. And so
those that take initiative.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so another leader taught me, when someone asks for my time. So if someone said to me, the script that I used, which is, hey, what would it take to earn, 20 minutes of your time to mentor me? I would give them an assignment. I wouldn't just say, wow, you've asked that so nicely. You must have listened to my podcast or listened to John Maxwell, that you've earned the right just by asking it that way. I give them something to do. And it's like what you said. I'm like, okay, well, do these 3 things, read this article. I'm going to send you a roadmap on how to build a business plan. I want you to read that. And then I want you to email me that business plan. How long? I'll send you the PDF as soon as we hang up. How long will it take you to do the business plan? They'll be like, by Friday. I'll be like, okay, great. What time Friday? Close of business. What time's close of business? 5. Okay, 5 o'clock. Great. Put it in my inbox by 5 o'clock. They've set the parameter. Put it in my inbox by 5 o'clock. I'll set a time to meet with you. And more than 9 times out of 10, never comes, never get the request. Now I know it's totally different.
That's actually brilliant. And I can certainly appreciate that. And that's the exact outcome I would expect from an exercise like that. And I think it is very helpful to weed out the serious from the unserious. One thing that has been successful for me in terms of trying to reach out to people that I don't already have relationships with. Number one, I'm always trying to see if there's somebody we have in common and speak to that. But what I'm really looking for is commonalities. Everyone's life is on social media today. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to scroll through someone's feed and learn a little bit about them. So for somebody like me, if you want to reach out, it's like, hey man, I would love to have some time with you. Also a big Michigan fan, go blue. Like that would earn so many points with me just because it's something that I'm deeply emotional about. As silly as it sounds, it's something I care about. There's so many different things you can speak to. Where I'm from, Miami. I'm happen to be from Miami, whatever. Love dogs. I have this beautiful 85-pound. Like there's something you can find that I know that we can connect over. It's worked unbelievably well for me just in terms of breaking the ice so that I don't feel like it's just another cold message and you're hitting up 1,000 people a day. And sometimes the funniest thing will happen. You'll go in your inbox and you'll get a message and it'll be like, hey, Josh, just wanted to see if I can take a moment to get some. I'm not even Josh. Like you're just copying pasting from the last person. So for whatever it's worth, whatever you're going to do it with intentionality and make sure that you're dotting your I's and you're crossing your T's, but just put some actual time and effort into it. We're all human beings. We're not walking chat GPTs. So take the time to actually have care and purity in your craft. And if you lead with the right intention because you genuinely want to learn and it's not just a numbers game, I think the result will be much more positive and optimistic in the long term.
One more question. I know this will play to your daily life and also to the broader audience, and that is that if you're going into I'm assuming you don't live in a $40 million house. I'm sorry if I
do not.
Okay, sorry.
And by the way, even if I could afford it, I still wouldn't live in one.
Okay,
me either.
Yeah.
Now you're going to go to a listing appointment. And the reason why I say this is really it transcends all of the markets. Invariably, like we have a realtor, phenomenal person, rock star in a different industry, knows marketing like you can't believe because they were a marketer for a clothing brand, so they've got that wired. They know nothing about finance. They know nothing about interest rates. They know nothing about lots of things. And, they're going to a listing appointment and, I have a friend, husband sort of is the unusual, less usual husband, sort of the take care of the house kind of thing. And the wife runs a major sector of a private equity fund. She is like finance, Wharton, Mm-hmm. What do you do? How do you handle a situation where that your client is more sophisticated in some important ways than you?
It's a great question. I think it's one of the things we run into very often. More often than not, our clients are more sophisticated than we are. And in general, they are more sophisticated. But when it comes to the practice of selling real estate, I like to think very humbly that we have a little more sophistication. So I'm always hyper respectful whenever I'm in that room. And I listen to what they say and I take it very seriously. One of the pitfalls of selling a lot of these larger properties is the person you are representing is very successful in life and everything they've ever done is right. So you have to know when it's time to push and when it's time to pull. And there's certain direction I will take from a seller because, again, it is their asset. If there's certain things they want me to do and it's within the purview of my ability to do that, I'm going to do it. But there are also those people that are impossible to please. And the one thing I've learned from doing this as long as I have is there's something glorious about being able to pick and choose the people you're going to work with. And just because you own an $80 million house or a $40 million house doesn't mean that I'm the right person to sell it. Mm-hmm. I want to enjoy my experience of doing this job every single day. I don't want to wake up stressed out because I have a pissed off seller who thinks that I am God Almighty himself when it comes to what's going to happen with this transaction. I'm going to be able to snap my fingers and the property is going to move. There's only so much I can control. And as I said before, there's two conversations I'm going to have. Every time I'm sitting across from a seller, I am nothing but honest and intentional. And I will feel the energy in that room. And more often than not, it feels like a safe space. And I might be intimidated because that person's bank account might be 100 times what mine is, but we're still people. And we can still relate to each other in a way that has nothing to do with their level of success versus mine. And my level of success in my business, I like to think is at a bit of a peak, like I've kind of rid the tides and waves of what it is in real estate. And I kind of like where I'm at right now. I'm always aspiring to do more. But ultimately, because we've broken off and we've started our own business, one thing that I have found is that entrepreneurs respect entrepreneurs. And they will be more often than not willing to sit and listen to the valuable things they think I have to say. And more often than not, they will be willing to heed, listen, and take that advice. It's not always the case. But you get good at figuring out pretty quickly who will and who won't. And it's knowing when to walk away. And that's okay, because there's always going to be other opportunities and other clients. And like I said before, I want to find my tribe. One of the things that's been really awesome for me in terms of honing my skill and craft in terms of listing appointments, one of the things we offer to our agents, especially newer-ish agents, they've been in the business 2 to 5 years, they don't have a lot of experience in those appointments, I offer to go with them. If they have an opportunity, and it's a big opportunity for them. Oftentimes you'll be on these big teams led by a mega agent and he sits in the room with you or she sits in the room with you. And just by being in that room, if the listing gets signed, they now own 50% of that listing. I have no interest in being in my agent's pocket. I just want to be there to provide for them, to show up for them, to support them. And guess what? It's valuable for me too, because I now get to continue to hone my craft by engaging in these conversations. And I'm also not shy to tell my agents, this is not going to be a good situation for you. And sometimes you need to know when to walk away. And that's a very valuable skill set to have, especially when you have a scarcity mindset early on, because every listing provides opportunity. Listings beget listings. But more often than not, unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. And the hardship, the heartache, and the PTSD that can come from having a very bad experience, you have to go through them at times. It's going to steal your spine. But when you can have enough wisdom to know how to avoid them, I think that's a very, very valuable skill to have.
And I just got to comment on this. Regardless of your level of sophistication or knowledge, if you're enthusiastic and you're willing to put forth the effort, you've used those words over and over again, there's major value in that to anyone. Yeah. And the right people will recognize that regardless of how much they know versus what you know, period.
Look, genuinely, I'm not a great salesman, but I know how to sell myself. I know who I am. I know what I offer. I know what I can provide. And I know that the most important thing for me is relationships. And all things being equal, whoever I'm sitting across from, there's something I'm going to glean and garner from that person, whether it leads to a successful transaction or not. I can't wait to soak that stuff up. And I can only hope I make just as much of an indelible impression on them as they do on me.
Mm-hmm. I had the unique opportunity to talk to one of the greatest investors, a guy, Barry Sternlicht, who founded Starwood Capital.
Sure. And
he's from Miami. He lives in Miami.
Yep.
There's how's that? Did I do the Miami link? Okay.
You did it great.
Okay.
You did it great.
And one of his co-founders, said, "Look, Barry's looking for some advice in the residential real estate space. I couldn't think of anybody better to put him in touch with. I want will you talk to him?" I'm like, "Of course." And then this guy who's very sophisticated gave me interesting advice. And he said, when you talk to Barry, stay in your lane. I'm referring you because I know residential real estate, probably generally and especially in Los Angeles. So stay in your lane. And I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, okay, of course. And he's like, do not answer any finance questions. If Barry asks you a finance question, say to him, "You're the finance guy." And I'm like, I didn't think I needed that advice, And then, sure enough, I'm on the phone with him. We're talking residential real estate, and he asked me a finance question. He was like, so we were talking about at the time, the parent company of Coldwell Banker. He said, "Well, who are the majority shareholders in that, or whatever?" And I was like, "Hey, Barry, I'm not. You're the finance guy, whatever." And then when I got back off the phone and I told my friend that, he was like, "Barry asked you that?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Anybody with a Bloomberg account knows the answer to that." I'm like, "Well, I don't have a Bloomberg account." He goes, "Yeah, I know that. But anybody in his, like the 100 minions underneath him know the answer. They're like, why is he asking you that?" I'm like, "I don't know, but I gave him the right answer," which is not in my lane. So that's one thing, is that I really am thinking about a couple that have a phenomenal house in Brentwood. They're my daughter's friends' parents or whatever. The mom is like private equity, rock star. And if I were at a listing appointment with her, and I know a lot about finance, I would say, you know what? If she's like, "Well, where do you think, interest rates are going or whatever?" I'd be like, "Well, wouldn't you know that better than me?" Sure. Or, you can always say, and that's a bad example because what I want to get back to is, just like Adam said before, in terms of it takes so little to do some homework. You should talk to a lender. Let's find out let's say you're going for a listing, okay? And the listing is $3.5 million. Go to a lender and find out right now, right before the listing appointment, what are all of the finance options for a buyer at $3.5 million. We're like, "Well, I'm not looking to represent the buyer. I'm looking to represent Adam, who's the seller. I don't need to know that." But what I would say, with 5 minutes worth of research, 15 minutes worth of research, or I call the John Grauman of 20 years ago or 15 years ago, a great mortgage broker, and say, "Hey, listen, what are the options?" I'd write them all down. Nowadays I would go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, there's a $3.5 million home purchase. It's in this zip code. What's the prevailing thing? What do the top economists think? Where do they think interest rates are going to go for the next 6 months? What advice would you give to?" I'd be writing all this stuff down, so that now when I go and sit down with Adam, even if Adam is a finance guy, I'd say, "Hey, Adam, you're talking about selling this house at $3.5 million. Let me tell you, nowadays, one of the biggest hurdles between somebody who actually wants to buy the house and then does buy the house is financing. So let me tell you, here are the different options. And, really this is a buyer's agent problem, but I want to step across the line and help buyers, facilitate this deal." And I think they would find that very impressive. Also, just other, like you said, Facebook or Instagram, we could find out a lot about you. You definitely should do all that homework. In addition to that, let's say that the house is in Silver Lake. I'd be looking at, what are the school districts? What are what's the walk score? How far are you away from the nice grocery store? Just these basic things.
Just do your homework and be prepared. Again, take initiative, separate yourself. It's not that hard. As you said before, there's so few barriers to entry in this business. And for three guys, candidly, that are all very well educated, the three guys sitting here, and I'm grateful for that. One of the things I love about real estate, it's the ultimate equalizer. Yep. Doesn't matter where you went to school. And I went to a great school. And with that said, some people weren't afforded that opportunity. This gives everyone an equal playing field. And it gives you such an opportunity to distinguish yourself, because quite frankly, the vast majority of agents are mediocre at best. And that's just the reality.
Yep. I will say this. I agree with that sentiment. Very grateful for the educational opportunity I've been given. If I could go back and do it over, this might sound crazy, I would do it differently. I would have started in this career much sooner. I would forego the law degree. I'm happy that I went to Michigan. I'll never say a bad thing about Michigan. But there's nothing that matters more than tried and true experience in the industry and business you're in. Going to law school didn't prepare me to be an attorney. What prepares you to be an attorney is actually practicing law. It's the same in real estate. So if I could have started this at 22, who knows where I'd be today? Jump in with both feet and an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, and you can never be overprepared. There's not enough preparation in the world that will ever set you up for failure. No doubt in my mind about that.
Well said. Do the reps.
And to the audience, Adam will agree, this is a terrible part-time job.
Terrible part-time job.
Terrible.
It's not. It's genuinely not. If you're going to do this and you're going to be serious about it, this is a business. It is a full-time job. It needs to be treated as such. If you respect it, it will respect you back in spades.
Okay. So we'll do a fire round, and a lot of times they're deep questions, but just give us what comes to mind, and we won't probe any further. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Wow, that's a deep question. To me, I think that is health, relationships more than anything else, and experiences. And ultimately knowing you get one shot at this life, I just don't want to have any regrets.
What's the attribute you most admire in others?
So I would say kindness, but from a male perspective, I always feel like I modeled myself after my father and my grandfather. And if I could describe them as one word, they're both gentlemen. And that's what I aspire to be more than anything else.
What's a talent you'd most like to have?
Singing. Wish I could sing. I can't.
What's your greatest extravagance?
Golf.
What's your greatest fear?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's changed a lot through the years, but I'll be sentimental here and I'll say losing people that I love most.
What's the quality you'd like to most develop in yourself?
I would like to be more organized. As much as I strive and aspire to do that, I'd like to be more organized and I'd like to be more tidy. As somebody who is diagnosed with OCD, I'm the least OCD person you'll probably ever meet in your entire life. My poor fiance has a lot of work to do behind me, unfortunately.
We're not supposed to comment during the fire round, but I'll tell you one funny thing, because you and I have a lot of similarities. And somebody once said to me, or I mean, you've probably heard it a dozen times, is like, cluttered desk, cluttered mind. And I look around and my desk is cluttered. I'm like, and then someone finally said to me, empty desk, empty mind. And I was like, yes, I got him. Do you want to
Sure.
do our...
So we're in this amazing city, as we all acknowledge and appreciate and admire. You go on this amazing hike, and there's so many amazing hikes in greater Los Angeles. And you get to the top, and beneath you is your friends, your family, your community, the people you really care most about. And you have the opportunity to shout down to them one thing. What do you shout?
Oh my God, that is a very deep, very existential question. I don't know that I have any sage wisdom or advice here. It's something I would really want more time to think fully on, but I guess I would just say love whatever you are. I think we live in a world where we're always comparing ourselves to the Joneses and everyone around us, especially with social media everywhere. And it's so funny, like I look at young kids today, I can only imagine how difficult it would be to be a teenager in my early 20s with the influence of social media and this looks-maxing community and the desire to be the most beautiful person or the richest person in your 20s or 30s. Life is messy. Enjoy it. In your 20s, fuck it up. Excuse my language, but fuck it up. Experience different things. In your 30s, maybe you start to figure out what you want to do in life. And in your 40s, maybe you get to enjoy the fruits of that labor. And if it happens later than that, so be it. You're dealt the cards you're dealt. Play the hand you have, not the hand you want.
Make the most with what you have. It's more than enough to accomplish anything you're committed to. And no one said it was going to be easy.
Yep.
I love it.
Love it, man. You're freaking awesome.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you guys, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.